welcome to the Assembly Line, an NES homebrew podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin from Kahan Games.
And I'm Beau from Soul Goose Productions.
And we're here to talk about homebrews. Now, the past two episodes have been completely focused on the NESdev competition, and we are back to our normal format now. So everyone, welcome back.
Yeah, we took some time to sort of cover the competition in a way that hadn't been done before, but yeah, it feels good to be back to just playing some games and talking about, what I just did Saturday morning.
Yeah, it's going to feel good to get back to being able to focus just on one game at a time.
So what are we talking about this time?
Well, I think the past, throughout the various episodes we've done, but especially like during the competition episodes, we've touched on sort of labeling various games as licensed quality. And I think maybe it would be a good idea for us to maybe go into detail of what we mean when we say licensed quality.
I would agree, especially with the next two episodes coming up, because in my mind, they would be very much licensed quality. And so, yeah, I guess, where do we start with that?
Well, let me stop us, I guess, before we even get started, because when we say licensed quality, like, when you think of games like Silent Service, which maybe aren't the most exciting games that have ever come out for the system, like, that's a licensed game, right?
I don't know what you're talking about. I have like 10 copies.
I think everyone does. That's why they're flooded all over the internet. Like, how did so many people buy that game? I don't understand.
I don't know if the world's ever going to know.
Well, maybe that's subject for another episode. But even like games like Jaws that like maybe don't get enough like positive attention, like there are so many licensed games, and I think maybe, even with the Atari into the Nintendo, there's a lot of licensed games that might be considered shovelware. So when we call a homebrew licensed quality, like, I guess, how are we describing it?
We tend to mean sort of the best of the NES's life cycle. So games like, Mario Brothers or Mario 3, Little Samsons, Gargoyle's Quest, Dragon Wars, Final Fantasy, the classics, the games you remember, the games that sort of defined the limits of the NES and what made the NES a great console to begin with, or back in the day.
So when we're saying a homebrew is licensed quality, we're saying that it's good stuff.
We mean that, yeah, it's got everything that the best of the library had, but it's being done today.
Okay.
So when we were looking at like Project Blue a couple episodes back for the NESdev competition, it was like, well, it's almost licensed quality. It's got sort of the physics from Mario, and it's got great graphics, great sound. It's got almost everything that, SMB had, except, it went screen by screen instead of scrolling, and, it wasn't quite as large with as many worlds, enemies, stuff like that. Like, so there's always that's generally the point of comparison is different games throughout the library. SMB is always a good one because, that was one of the first defining games for the console. You don't hear people, going, well, that's a lot like Nuts and Milk.
And a lot of times it's not even a fair or really like a true comparison, because games like Zelda, which Zelda is definitely considered one of the top tier licensed games, like it didn't even have scrolling. It was a screen by screen game, right?
Well, it's always kind of a pick and choose. Yeah, so Zelda didn't have scrolling, but scrolling isn't the defining feature of a licensed game. It's graphics, gameplay, sound, memorability. It's, a game has to have so many hit high levels on so many different parts. And so for a game to hit licensed quality, what we mean is that it's, hitting at least, 4 of the 5 categories of what makes a game great.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's not often that a game sort of does everything right, because usually there's maybe not a super shortcoming, but maybe the graphics aren't quite as good as they could be on a homebrew, or maybe the music's a little bit lacking. But we've had the good fortune of being able to focus on some homebrews that really, really could be considered licensed quality. And I think that if you sort of took a time machine back to the early 90s and maybe put these games in the stores, I think that they would fit right in.
Well, that's the hard part. If the year was 1986 and you're up against Silent Service, yeah, I'd take Battle Kid in a heartbeat. Like, come on. But, that cuts both ways. On the one hand, you're comparing yourself to 776 games or whatever, and, 500 of them are garbage. Not garbage, but, they're not the best. But then you're comparing yourself to the, 50 that are amazing. And so it pushes you to do better, but it also gives you some sort of unrealistic expectations about what you should be doing with your time.
Yeah, and it's getting tougher and tougher, I think, because as, these projects trickle out, the collectors and the enthusiasts are seeing, oh, homebrew creators are getting to this level. Now they just assume all of the homebrew creators are at this level, and maybe, like, is that fair? Like, the people that are just starting out now, are they given a fair shot to sort of get their feet set and get their bearings?
Well, that's the hard part, yeah. We're now comparing ourselves with each other, not just against the licensed library. And yeah, if it is your first game, how do you stack up against somebody who it's their, 10th game? How many have you done, Kevin? 10? 11?
I've lost count.
Oh, gee, so many you've lost
well,
count.
I mean, but how many of them were good,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, they
That
don't
is
remember the
debatable.
sneak and peeks.
Well, I think that people remember the sneak and peeks more than the games that they should remember.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure they do.
Yeah, well, you and everyone else, it seems.
Yeah, so I mean, do we have the space in the homebrew community for both to coexist? A game like Rob, many years ago when he was first starting out, did tic-tac-toe, and his newest game is, a pseudo 3D dungeon crawler. Like, how do you compare those two?
I don't know. I personally like different games for different moods. There are times when I want to sit down and just play a quick game of tic-tac-toe, and I'll be perfectly happy. And honestly, a lot of times I find the games that maybe have some more shortcomings, I find them more endearing to play. Like, it's great to release a game that's flawless on all levels. Like, that's what we all strive for. But, when too many of those start coming out, it's the ones that are a little bit more unique and have a little bit more personality that I think are going to start standing out a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can have so much polish and so much technical prowess, but if the game isn't made with that sense of love and fun, like, it falls flat.
But I think it's going to be interesting to see the community develop and, like, what direction it starts taking, because I think that a lot of developers, because there are a lot of homebrew developers for the NES now, and it's a great time to be involved in the community. But I think that more and more of them are sort of starting to find their niche. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how each individual person's projects, like how they compare to their previous projects, how they compare to each other. And overall, it's just going to be a lot of fun.
Well, that is something that's sort of interesting, too, is you see individual developers grow. And you can only do that if they take the time and have the sort of the guts to release these kind of littler projects that, are learning projects, the ones that get them going.
You don't just come out of the woodwork and release a Super Bat Puncher, right?
Well, that may be a bad example.
It's very much not the norm, I would say.
Yeah. Most people, they start off small. They're very public about it. They, build as they go. But, some people, they only do big projects. Derek from Gradual Games, he's done Nomalos and Aulia, side-scroller, and then a Zelda-like. Like, that's pretty big.
I think that as someone who's been around for a while, I would almost encourage people not to just go big from the start. Like, I think that sort of starting small, focusing on, I don't know, like, mess up. Like, you have to figure out how not to do things before you figure out the right way to do things. And I don't know, I've done plenty of things the wrong way, and I'm still doing things the wrong way. Brian tells me every single time I release a game and I refuse to change the way I do my sprite routines because I hard code all my sprites.
Oh,
that's a huge no-no.
Yeah,
I know. But like you said, I've done so many games, I'm not changing. Forget it, man. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah, until you have to redo all your sprite routines at the last minute because they don't work because you hard coded them. Don't ask me how I know. It's interesting because we don't have the constraints that licensed developers had. We have endless time. We have cheap memory. We don't have any like the censorship things that they had. We can make whatever we want, and as big or as small as that is, as lewd or as crude as we want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best part, man. Like, all of us who are making these games, like, we really can do whatever we want to do. Like, whatever crazy ideas we have, like, trapped up in the depths of our brains, like, we can do it. And if we don't know how, like, we can take the time to figure it out. You know, I've been working on Unicorn for God knows how long at this point, but, like, it's just getting to the point where, like, the internet capabilities are starting to be feasible on the NES. So, like, I'm finally at some point going to get to release that and get to experience that joy of finally releasing something that I've worked on, you know, that I've had in my brain for so long. So as a developer, I think that it's really special that, you know, if we imagine it, we can do it.
That's one of the nice things too. When we say licensed, we often mean that the gameplay is solid and that it's actually a fun experience. And that's where a lot of licensed era games fell short. They were rushed. They had these deadlines. The goal was to make money. Whereas we can take those extra, 6 months and polish it out and make it decent and beta test it and make it playable and really just, make it what we want it to be, as opposed to just something that is a financial task we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Rob from Sly Dog Studios, he posted a thread, and I think it was on Nintendo Age, how he was sort of calling out, maybe not calling out, but he was letting it be known that he thought that, like, these homebrews that were coming out, like, he thought the one thing that was lacking was the fact that no one was taking the time to polish them. And I think that right now, at least, I think there are so many projects coming out that really have taken the time to, put that little animation in when the character stops running, or, when they fall to the ground from a high cliff or something. Like, they're just taking the time to take and to put their games to that next level. And I think it's really paying off.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to get stuck in a pit or walk through a wall or die from, cheap collision detection. Like, most of us take the time to really hone that down. And to me, that's almost more licensed quality than graphics or sound or any of that stuff.
Yeah, control is, I think, the hardest thing to really nail. Like, you can get a super talented graphics guy and a super talented musician, but as a programmer, to really figure out how to nail physics or just gravity or all those little things that really make a game feel like a game, like, it's hard to really nail that, I think.
So what game are we going to be talking about this week, Kevin?
Well, Beau, I mean, ever since we started this podcast, there have been a few sort of games that we've looked forward to taking a closer look at. The Mad Wizard comes to mind. Some of the heavyweights of the NES homebrew community. And I know that you have been looking forward to this episode for what probably feels like your whole life. But today we are going to talk about Lizard.
Lizard.
Brad Smith. Yes.
So
it's happening.
Why is Lizard famous already, for better or worse?
Why is Lizard famous? I mean, it had a pretty successful Kickstarter campaign. I mean, that seemed to get the word out and get people hyped.
No?
Then why do you think it's already famous, for better or worse?
Because it's taken 4 years to finish.
Oh!
I thought you'd appreciate that joke.
I do, very much. And I mean, I'm sure Brad, who we'll speak to in a little bit, has taken some flack for that over the years. But the day came. The game's out. Everyone can play it now. You can download it digitally. You can buy it complete in box. And you finally had a chance to sink your teeth into this game.
I did, my sharp lizard teeth. And this was one of the first...
Is your lizard the lizard of happiness?
My lizard is the lizard of happiness. Yes.
Nice.
Very good. You did that well. Lizard was one of the first sort of full NES Kickstarters that wasn't, goats versus Nazis that 2 people funded. It, got enough to be funded. It was successful. Brad, had this huge demo, which was like awesome, and you could actually sit there and play the game. But, who is Brad Smith, eh?
Brad Smith is a Canadian who seems to like soup.
He does like soup. His Twitter, like in addition to, the travails of developing, a homebrew game, is also filled with a lot of personal asides. And one of them was his epic quest for the perfect soup.
Yeah, and it's cool because he chose to make this game called Lizard about a lizard, and he really went all in. I mean, not only did he sort of consume himself with lizard references, he even owns a lizard costume in which he changed all of his avatars to him in the lizard costume.
I feel like they were that before the demo.
Oh, really?
I'm
so
pretty
he's just
sure.
always been part lizard.
I don't know. That was one of the things we strangely didn't ask him about. But every time I'm at a convention and I see somebody in a lizard costume, I kind of creep around. I'm like, is that Brad? It never is, but one of these days.
Yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, so Brad is actually like, I always hate to use this word, but he's a real developer. He's actually like has worked in the official industry, at, I want to say it was like at THQ or something like that, back, several years ago before he started this whole Lizard Odyssey.
Yeah, and it's not like he like worked remotely from home. Like he moved to be a programmer at a game company. Like he moved to California or something, right?
Yeah, from snowy Canada, that is quite the change. So, the game itself, how would you describe Lizard for the folks at home?
Do I go into my personal reflection yet, or am I sticking...
Give them general things they can relate to, Kevin.
Okay. I would say it's an exploration platformer.
Okay, I think that's fair. Do you run around and shoot things with your awesome, crazy alien mutant lizard costume?
No, and this might be something that not a lot of people know, because I followed this project pretty closely as he worked on it. I backed it on Kickstarter. I was getting all the updates. I was reading all the updates. He went into a lot of great detail on these updates for these various, parts that he was working on at the time. But I had no idea that when I sat down to play, the lizard doesn't even attack. Like, you're avoiding everything the whole game.
I think that is like sentence 2 in the Kickstarter is this is a non-combat game. I don't know how you guys missed that.
Well, I was looking at flashy videos and animated GIFs.
He had a demo. You could play it.
I wanted to save myself. It was like I wanted to be a virgin and lose myself to the lizard cartridge when it came in the mail.
For the very first time. It is very open-ended in terms of exploration. The emphasis is not on combat. Again, not combat, exploration. And along the way, Brad is extremely vague. There are no signs that say go this direction or go up here or do these things to win this part.
Not only is it vague, but like you run into stones and you go to read them and it's just gibberish.
Like, if you have the Lizard of Understanding.
Well, Kevin is not the Lizard of Understanding. Kevin is the Lizard of Mass Confusion.
You start with the Lizard of Understanding.
Well, even when you read it with the Lizard of Understanding, like, there aren't any spaces in the sentence.
Sometimes.
The sentence doesn't start with the first word.
Sometimes.
It's just like nonsense. Sentence in the middle that makes no sense. Nonsense.
Oh man, but you gotta piece it together. That's the mystery. That's the allure.
The allure?
The allure. It's a seductive, vague allure.
Lizard is the siren of NES games.
My lizard is the Lizard of Sirens.
Tell me about the coins in the game, Beau.
So, along the way, it's not just like, hey, you're in this world, go run around until something happens. Although it kind of is.
Yeah.
There's little things. So like there's coins scattered throughout the world, and you can collect these coins. You're like, there must be something here if I can collect coins. And so you try to collect coins and you push yourself to explore a little further. There are also lizard costumes. Well,
yes.
Costumes? Is that the word I want?
I think they're costumes.
Okay. Well, you're a little tiny person and you get out of your one lizard and into a different lizard. And so then this new lizard has different abilities, and it, of course, lets you explore in a different way. Fans of Metroid will feel right at home here, except for, you don't have an arm cannon.
Right. There's that.
You get the lizard, there's different ones like the red lizards, the lizard of fire, and the, blue lizards, the lizard of water, which lets you explore underwater. And I'm not going to give the rest away, but there's this whole slew of cool lizards, including a couple secret ones that really don't seem to serve a purpose, which were great. But you go exploring. You put on a lizard and you go exploring, you find some stuff, and then eventually if you explore enough, you find some bosses. Like, I guess they are bosses. They're giant, large enemies, which most of us would refer to as bosses, I suppose.
Yes, and what happens when you beat a boss?
When you beat a boss, well, we can give some stuff. It's not really giving it away. This is pretty basic.
Yeah.
When you beat a boss, you get an ending, and
And how confusing is that?
well, but it's not a real ending because you just like
Do
start
you?
over.
Do you?
I do. You have to be patient with this game. You have to engage all of your NES experiences, and you have to be the gamer. Come on, Kevin. You're better than this. You don't need a guide.
Look, this game, you say I have to be patient with this game. This game turned me into a mental patient.
Oh, man, that was good. You've been waiting weeks for that, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So you explore this giant, huge. I mean, it's like the largest. It makes Battle Kid look like Battle Baby.
And not only is it like a huge world, there's like two sides.
Yeah,
to
man,
the
recto
world.
and verso, which for those you book fans out there, you got the left side, the right side, like, of the page. So if you look at Lizard as a giant world with a book theme, there's lots going on, and Brad does not give anything away. He wants you to discover it, and it's the type of game where you really have to put in the time to appreciate it, I guess, but to really, like most old NES games, nobody picked up Legacy of the Wizard and was like, oh, this game's great. They picked it up and they're like, this is crap, but it was the only game they had, so they kept playing.
Yeah, and that's the difference. I mean, I can imagine if I would have gotten this game when I was young, you're forced to give it a try. You rent this game for a week and you get tired of it after 2 hours. Like, that's the game you're going to be playing for a week. You got to come back to it. So you're right. I didn't have the patience, and I gave up on this game after probably 30 minutes because, man, like, when you're dropped into this world to begin with, it's very unforgiving. I mean, one hit and you're done.
There aren't that many enemies.
We'll get into the details of what specifically irritated the piss out of me.
I see.
But you made me go back to it. You said, Kevin, we're doing a podcast on this game. You need to give it another chance. And I did, and I'm glad that you made me go back because I did enjoy it more. Still don't enjoy it as much as you do, but I can at least now see some of its redeeming qualities.
I guess I'm just Mr. Patient, but man, we're always told where to go and what to do, and especially with games these days, it's like, hey, pick up these coins. They'll do something good later. This game's just like, here's some coins. You can pick them up if you want, and you don't have to if you don't.
We won't tell you what they're for or if they serve any purpose. We're going to put them in the hardest places possible.
I still don't quite know what the coins do because you really have to, I think, get them all. But, that's the joy. Like, even though I have beaten the game, I figured out the puzzle that involves beating the game, all this meta game stuff. But the coins, they're very hard to get.
Yes. And not only are they hard to get, you have to do something with the coins before, if you die, the coins disappear unless you do something with them. So I don't want to give it away, but it's tough to wind up with coins at the end of the day.
Oh, well, let's try not to give too much stuff away. What do you think about the graphics?
The graphics are gorgeous. I mean, as much trash as I have and will talk about this game, the graphics are definitely not one of the things I'm displeased with. I mean, the world is beautiful. You're running around as a lizard. There's these little birds that fly away as you run close to them. There's little frogs hopping around. I don't think I've seen such beautiful characters in that small of a sprite. The birds are tiny, but the animation that he used to make them fly, I don't know, it's just gorgeous. It really does feel like a world with things living in it.
I know, and that's one of the, to me, that was one of the greatest things. And you have it's this giant world, but you have these different zones. You have, the sky zone, and you have the, I'm going to butcher some of, not butcher, I'm going to forget some of the actual names, but like the ice zone, the cave zone, the root zone, which is like the roots of this giant tree in the world that, is the sky zone. The sky zone, you're running around this like giant branches of a tree, and then you go into the roots, and then from the roots you go into these caverns, and then you go to the steam zone, which has these cool like moving pistons and like shoots up steam. Like Brad just did such an amazing job with creating this world that it makes things like Metroid look like child's drawings.
It does. And the fact that he did it all himself, like
Yeah.
including the music. I mean, even the music is gorgeous. Like everything about this game aesthetically is very, very pleasing to the eyes and the ears. He did a hell of a job. And I know that, in the middle of the Kickstarter process, he decided that he wanted to expand the screens and expand the size of, the scope of the world. We were giving him a lot of flack about the delays and stuff, but I think that, now that the game is out and we've seen the changes that he made, and like from playing the demo to the finished release product, I think it's easy to say that they were worthwhile changes.
Well, that was one of the biggest things that worried me is I loved the demo. I thought the demo was just amazing. It had these single screens and you could kind of see what to do, and it was easy to map out where you were, and like it was kind of like Battle Kid where you could look at the screen and go, I need to do these things to get through this, except it was more open in terms of I can also go all these other directions. And I thought a lot of that was going to be lost when he went to this sort of scrolling, and it's just two screens, but that changes the whole like dynamics of the game.
Yeah.
And nothing was lost. If anything, stuff was gained, I think. And there's always a worry with single screen games, like you jump up and then you fall back down, so you're constantly switching screens. And he really minimized a lot of that. Like he would place the jump just low enough that you wouldn't do that, or when you did trigger it, like there was a kind of like a safety block that you just run into so you wouldn't just fall off the other edge of a platform, that type of thing.
Yeah, you can tell he took great care in his level design for sure.
Oh yeah, and Brad did these wonderful Kickstarter updates. You can go read them at your leisure. That are basically a tutorial into NES programming and like what it means to really deliberately design a game. And there's just some cool stuff. And did we mention bosses?
We did. I think I saw 3 of them.
Oh man, so like you're going through this world and everything is kind of the same, in a very good way. Each zone has its own challenges and whatnot, but you're still the little lizard, and the enemies are still more or less the enemies. And then you hit these boss rooms, and you want to talk about some cool creative bosses. Lizard has them.
Yeah, and I think I recall saying that like if this game was just bosses, it would be one of my favorite games ever made. Like the bosses, and I haven't even seen all of them because I'm not good enough or patient enough, as Beau is saying, to get to find them and figure out how to beat them. But the ones that I saw, I can't think of any bosses that are cooler in any NES games. Like it's really incredible.
Well, and because you're not just sitting there like Contra, shooting the boss till it dies, like they're almost puzzles in terms of how to defeat them, and you're gonna die a bunch before you figure out exactly how to beat them. But it is so rewarding when you're finally like, you know what, I can beat this guy every time. I know exactly what to do, and here's how you do it. And it feels so rewarding.
Yeah, and the sort of intensity is amped up because like when you start the game and it doesn't give you any sort of direction, you have to sort of meander about. But when you finally get to one of the bosses, as a lizard creature or a human in a lizard costume, whatever it is, without the ability to attack it, you do have to figure out what to do very quickly because you're going to die, in one hit. So you have to figure it out. But the good thing is like the first few times when you get there and you're sort of figuring out whatever the puzzle is for that boss and you get a game over, at least at that point, exactly how to get back to the boss, to give it another try.
Well, he puts save points all over the world, and there's usually a save point outside of almost every boss except for one that I can think of. So you can just, you die, you restart, you're back at the boss in 2 seconds. It's super easy. Well, the boss isn't, but the whole
Right.
process is. I did notice when I was playing a lot of the bosses that they started off more difficult, and then as the level went, or the encounter went, like the boss kind of got easier in a way, and yet I would choke almost every time. Like it was so irritating. He's shown the frog boss online, so we can talk about that one some.
Yeah.
It's this giant frog that scales up the screen as you like hop onto platforms, dodging it, and then you can like push some blocks onto its eyes, and the eyes close, and then it quits shooting things. But you still have to scale this like castle, and with no shooting, I found the scaling of the castle to be so intense and like so nerve-wracking that I could never finish it. It took I don't know how many times I played it before I finally beat it, and it was like the dumbest thing that I couldn't just make these simple jumps, but I'm sure he placed them in such a way that they were more difficult to make, knowing him.
Can you think of a bigger boss in the NES library?
Hardly. I mean, you have to go with like horizontal shooter things like the giant boss, the clay dude in Mega Man, or like the level 1 of Contra with that giant like wall. But like in terms of like a moving one that is going after you, that frog boss is just giant.
Yeah, he did a great job with that, for sure. I mean, even the eyes blink, right? Like the level of detail that he put in this game is really impressive.
Yeah. Oh man, it's good. So what'd you think of the music?
I mean, I already said it's one of the sort of highlights of the game. I've been a fan of his music for some time. I know he did the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon cartridge. And I've heard a little bit of his stuff in the past, but you can tell that he is a very accomplished sort of composer. And his music, I mean, it's a little unfair because his music and his graphics and like aesthetically, he's just so talented at producing professional quality work. Each music for each of the areas, I think, is just perfect. Like every sort of theme nails the feeling. I mean, maybe that's what he intended to do. I'm sure it's what he intended to do, but like it just seems so effortless, when you're running around playing.
It does. He kind of riffs on a main theme for each of the areas that it gets transformed kind of based on that area. And so you have, the fire zones, real kind of intense. You got dropping lava and jumping platforms and a few more enemies, and so it gets a little more intense. And the steam zone too, like it's got some machinery feel to it. But then you get to like the root zone, and it's just like this contemplative, wondrous, you're under this tree in this world. Why?
And I think one of the things that impressed me most, I mean, when you think of NES music, you think of the Mario theme or the Zelda theme, like these very sort of overly melodic NES melodies. The music in this game is almost non-traditional. Like he thought very far outside the box and made it almost atmospheric, which I think is very hard to do on the NES.
This was one of the first NSFs that I ever listened to when I got back into NES things and then programming and all that, was the Lizard one. And there were certain tracks that I could just listen to nearly endlessly. I mean, they'd go for like a half hour before I'd forget to change it to the next one. And it was just like, this music is amazing.
Yeah, you just get lost in it. I mean, and that only benefits the game because the game is so explorative. And you sometimes you have a hard time sort of feeling grounded. Like you just feel lost a lot of the time. And I know that you have said on more than one occasion that you love the feeling of being lost.
Love to
but
be
for
lost.
Someone who like being lost stresses them out, I think having that atmospheric music, it acts as a calming agent. I mean, it just sort of it works as this whole encompassing package.
Well, you almost don't like want to leave an area because the music is so good, and you just want to keep listening to like that area's tune, and so you end up exploring that area a little more than perhaps you would have otherwise. And you also know which area you're in without being told based on those musical changes.
And that's pretty hard to do. He accomplished a lot.
So I know you haven't seen the whole game, but although I pray and hope that one day you will. But what were some of the memorable locations or levels that you stick in your mind as you continue to contemplate the lizard?
I think the Void Zone. That was one of the most interesting areas I think I've ever seen in a video game, period, let alone an NES game.
Oh yeah.
It's tough because I want people to play it and sort of experience it for themselves, because describing it doesn't do justice to the feeling that you get when you're sort of experiencing it. But yeah, like it just, the colors are really interesting. The enemies on the screen in the Void Zone are very unique. To say the least. I don't know, it's just such a cool area. I had never seen anything like it before.
It's like the Lost Woods on acid.
Yeah. On a bad trip.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a good trip.
No, I mean, it is a good trip, but it's very unique.
And there's so many entrances to the Void Zone. It's just, and there's so many ways out. It's super neat in terms of an area. But he also has a bunch of, the staples in the game. The water level, the sky level, the cave, the castle, the pillars and runes, things like that. There's a bunch of, the standard things that you're used to. And so it's not like he's throwing you completely into the Void Zone. But then there were some other areas like the Steam Zone.
Yeah, that was cool. The moving platforms and the steam coming up. I don't know. It's just that was probably my second favorite area. It was very hard. That's probably one of the hardest areas that I found in the game to traverse, but stylistically it looked very cool.
Well, it's, because there's so many save points, you have endless lives, you don't really lose anything when you die, you keep your lizard costume and all that, so it's, even though you die a lot, it's sort of a safe exploration. I mean, you're not losing much other than those coins that you're not going to get all of anyways.
And you lose motivation and self-worth. And...
Oh, there it is. I have one last favorite, like, sort of area that it's kind of a small area of the game. It's sort of a pass through as you get to a different one. But the tree maze, I want to say that's like all the way down to the right in either Recto or Verso. But it very much reminded me of the Mad Wizard's tree maze, where you're up in the tops of the Elderwood. And I don't know why I like that so much, but it's just those like caverns through the trees are just, they fascinate me.
Yeah, I had one other favorite area, but I don't want to give it away because the gameplay style almost completely changes and it turns into like a fun little mini game. So I very much hope that some of the listeners come across this, because I mean, you were so excited about it that you sent me a password to that spot.
I did, because I knew you weren't going to get to it otherwise.
Well, you weren't wrong, but no, it was very, very cool. So this game is filled with secrets and just cool little unexpected things that will put a smile on your face.
Well, that's one of the things too, like it took 3 or 4 years or however long to finally finish, but I don't feel like a minute of that was wasted. Like it just kept making the game better. Who incorporates whole other gameplay styles just because they feel they need to be there? Like, regardless of the time.
So, I assume you liked it, right?
Oh, man. Like, playing the demo, I was like, this could be, the demo itself was one of my top, 5 NES games, period. Mm-hmm. And now having played the whole game, it's like, this is definitely, top 3, beating out most licensed stuff. Like, this is it. I mean, and it's almost the number 1 homebrew for me. We'll talk about a different one maybe next episode. I don't know.
Interesting.
But I want to say that this is more like my style of game. It's just, you go exploring. I love that. You get lost. You go find things. Like, what about you?
I want to like it. I mean, I do like it, but I want to love it, but it's just not... I'm the type of guy that wants my hand held. I want to be told what to do. I want to play level 1. After level 1, I want to play level 2. Like, I want to be able to see a noticeable progression in the game and, know that I'm accomplishing what I'm supposed to be accomplishing. This game, not only does it not tell you where to go, but it doesn't tell you what to do, and then after you beat a boss, it shows you, the credit screen, and you're like, what is happening? Like, you're supposed to see the credit screen at the end of the game, and I've only beaten a single boss. Like there's so much confusion about the game. It frustrated me very quickly. But I'm glad that you love it so much, Beau.
Man, but that was the thing. Like, you pick up a lizard, Like, you get the Lizard of Fire, and the Lizard of Fire has the ability to, like, melt ice and kind of get rid of those poison frogs and some other things.
Yes, fuck those frogs.
I know you hate those frogs.
I hate
You
them
know they're a
so
different
much.
color than the normal frogs, right?
Yes, at this point I do know that, and I finally got to the point where I could notice them, but they're so damn tiny. You're running along, you're trying to get back to that spot that you were at before, and then you run into a freaking little frog, and oh my god, I don't like frogs.
I think you need a better TV or to get your eyes checked. I'm not certain.
Okay.
Each lizard kind of has its own path, and so, like, you know that there has to be an end to that path. Like, this lizard can go places that others can't, so where can he go that others can't? And you explore down that path until you find the boss. Like, how is that hard?
Well, I think a major part of the game is, I guess, going around and mapping things out first. Like, you have to familiarize yourself enough to know that when you pick up that random lizard costume, it goes to this location that I have mapped in my brain that I went to. But there's so many damn rooms, like, I just can't keep them straight. I can't remember.
It's such a huge game.
Yes, it is. It's so big. That's
but
what
if
she
there's
said.
if there's a wall of ice, you know that you need the fire lizard to go through the wall of ice. Like, done.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. I can't argue with that, but to me it was a very frustrating game.
I find it so strange. Like, I know that every game has its player, and some people like this or something, but this is like Zelda good, where it's like nobody can dislike this.
I do love Zelda. I do not love Lizard.
I know, and you were nice enough to kind of put up with me telling Brad that you weren't a super fan like myself.
Well, I mean, he knows. I mean, he even mentioned that he knew this game wasn't going to be for everyone when he was making it. And there are so many good qualities. I mean, there are just some things that I personally would have changed to make it a little bit more accessible, but it's not my game. Like, he put out the game that he wanted to make, and I 100% respect him for that. And it is a gorgeous game. And I can't argue with its brilliance. It's personally not the game for me.
Seeing that, like, open-endedness and that vagueness is what makes it so replayable for me as well. Whereas I've really found most homebrew games, like, even if they're wonderful experiences, like ones that become classics to me almost right away, like, they often lack that exploration element, and Lizard has it. Like, it leaves me wondering. I mean, I think I figured out the boss thing when I wasn't even playing. I was like laying in bed and was like, oh man, that's how that pieces together. And like, I ran back to the controller, turned it on, and was like, oh yeah, this is it. I got it, finally. Like, it tugs at your brain in such a way that most games don't, homebrew or licensed.
Yeah, no, it is great. And I'm sure I didn't even find a quarter of the secrets that are in the game.
I hope I didn't find a quarter of the secrets in the game.
Well, we mentioned that the game's out, the Kickstarter finished, the game has been released. Like, how can people listening acquire or play this game?
Well, the easiest way is to just go download the free demo right now. Like, you can go check it out. You can see if you hate it like Kevin or if you love it like me. He doesn't hate it. I'm just teasing. But yeah, it's out there. And you can also, if you want to compare to like sort of a development perspective, you can go check out the old version as well, which was the single screen edition, which was part of the Kickstarter. And you can go download the NSF if you want to check out the music.
You just keep saying that you can download them. Where do they go to download them?
Yeah, you can go download them at lizardnes.com. And you can purchase it through Infinite NES Lives if you want it on cartridge. There was kind of a special limited white cartridge for Kickstarter backers, and there were some that were immediately sold once the game was released as well. But there was sort of I want to say it was probably limited to a couple hundred. And if you do want the full experience, if you have a Power Pack or EverDrive or whatnot, you can actually buy the whole ROM for like $10. PayPal, credit card, all that good stuff off of itch.io, but it's linked off of lizardnes.com. So there's really like no excuse not to play it. Go check out the demo. If you hate it, don't buy it. But if you love it, find a way to support the creator. And I do hope that Brad keeps on making games, because these are great.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell that he is a master at his craft. So I hope that this game does well enough that he's inspired to do something else, because it's gorgeous, it plays great, and I am very much looking forward to what the future holds for Mr. Soup.
I just look forward to replaying Lizard over and over throughout the years.
Well, you play Lizard, I will play Mad Wizard, and we'll all be happy.
So we are actually going to talk with Brad himself and sort of get his perspective on various complicated soup-driven thoughts. How you doing, Brad?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, so I guess, it seems that you've been around for quite some time and you've done a lot of kind of various things in the community, but sort of how did you first get started in the Nest Dev community?
Let's see. I found NES Dev. When did I find it? Maybe 2012 or 2011. I forget what my join date was, but it was sort of coming from Family Tracker. For anyone listening that doesn't know, like Family Tracker is a music program for making music for NES, basically. And yeah, I made a cover of a Pink Floyd album called Dark Side of the Moon. Some people might be familiar with it. I think it's one of the greatest selling albums of all time or something. But yeah, for some reason I was compelled to cover it for NES. And when I finished that, like people started sending me stuff and talking to me, and I found my way to like the Family Tracker community, which was kind of cool. Like all these people talking about NES music and stuff. And I got involved in that. And then eventually, I'm a career programmer, main job. I thought it'd be fun to program for the NES, and wanting to know how to do that basically led me to the NES Dev forums, which I found to be a pretty inviting community when I kind of stumbled in there. And so I've stuck around since then.
It's crazy how many of you guys got started with music, playing around with it or discovering the tracker stuff and just sort of going from there and becoming, full game programmers at some point. But
so you originally got into the community because you were interested in making music, and then you transitioned into wanting to learn how to program for it?
Yeah, like it just seemed like an interesting, well, at first it was like people kept asking questions about emulators. Emulators they're only as accurate as far as people have made them match things that they want to run with them, right? So, people were always asking questions about Family Tracker, like, does it really sound like this if I do this in this weird order that no game ever did, and blah, blah, blah. So I could just write a program and run it on an NES and see what it does. And that was kind of like my original reason. It was just like questions kept coming up and I wanted to know. Okay. But it also just seemed like a fun system. Like I was used to programming for modern stuff, modern consoles or computer, where you have all these levels of hardware abstractions and drivers and APIs that interact with the drivers. And the NES, when I started using it, is just like, there's no operating system. It's just the bare CPU and some attached stuff. And you just put some data that it can read and see what it does. Like it's very direct, and I liked that. It felt like a different way to program, I guess.
You touched on your sort of programming background and what you do for a living, but let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your musical upbringing. Like you seem to have a pretty good sort of grasp on, from what I can tell, anything like music theory and chord progressions and things like that. Like what was your musical upbringing like?
Okay. Basically my parents wanted me to take piano lessons when I was pretty young. I don't know. I was like 3 or 4, and I kind of hated piano lessons. I didn't like practicing. Yeah. But I really liked music, and I liked what it enabled me to learn about it. So I'm very glad I had those lessons, even though at the time I felt like, I don't know, I enjoyed playing piano sometimes at the time, but like most of the time I didn't like doing the work, and I always felt anxiety like every week going to a lesson. It's like, have you practiced? And I'm like, no.
We always just fought for last place in trumpet, so this is very different.
Oh.
I forgot you play trumpet, Beau. That's funny.
Oh, the world does, yes, thankfully.
But I mean, it gave me a foundation. It gave me an instrument that I could play, and it gave me a lot of knowledge about like what does written music look like, that sort of thing. So I kept learning about it, over the years. Through high school, I did pretty well in high school music, and I played in like as many bands as I could kind of get away with in my extracurriculars. I played trombone in places in high school, but I played other instruments too. I found a guitar in the closet that nobody had played in like 10 years or my lifetime. Maybe it was like, I think I was like 16 when I found it. And I was like, how long has this been in the closet? I learned how to play it. So I did.
So you taught yourself how to play it?
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, I mean, somebody taught me how to play a piano. I would say most of learning to play an instrument is, so I don't feel entirely self-taught. Like
You had a grasp of how chords are structured with major and minor chords and that kind of thing, and you could figure it out from there.
Yeah, like sort of like what I was saying about coming to the NES. Like it wasn't my first programming language or first game programming experience. It was moving from one to another and learning the differences and getting there. But I think once you know one instrument, you can move on to others a lot easier than another instrument.
Well, let's talk about the Dark Side of the Moon album that you covered real quick.
Okay.
You did a great job with it. I'm a huge fan of the album, yours and the original, obviously. When you originally sought out the desire to do it, like, did you just cover a song and then say, "Oh, I did that, I may as well do the full album," or did you like initially set out to do the full album from the start?
So I think the first time I ever heard the album, like my parents were playing it, and I heard "On the Run." And to me, that sounded, like it had a synthesizer in it on a looping sequence, so it's very repetitive and, slowly turning the knobs and changing the timbre of the sound. It sounded like video games to me at age, I don't know how old
I can see
like
that.
8 years old or whatever. So I was very interested in this album all of a sudden that I'd never heard before. Just because I was really into video games as a kid.
Would that have been like Atari at the time?
What did I have? I had an Atari ST. That was the first computer we had in my house.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And then later I got a 2600 and a Master System, Sega Master System.
What's that?
I'm
just kidding.
And I didn't actually have an NES. My cousin had an NES. My neighbor down the street had an NES. Some of my friends did. So I'd play it at their house, but I never had one at home until a couple of years ago. Until I wanted to program on one. That's why I bought one.
Seriously?
That's really interesting that you had no sort of nostalgic affinity, like, personally for the system, but decided to go after it.
I would say I have a fair bit of nostalgia for it, but I just never I didn't get to dig in deep into NES games until emulation happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was all pervasive. It was, everybody had it. So even if you didn't own it, every other kid did. So, I mean, you were exposed to it. It makes sense.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, so I didn't ever beat most NES games in that situation because I'd only be able to play it for like an hour or something. But I'd have friends, like one friend had Star Tropics, and I'd go over to his house and one day we're playing this chapter, another day we're playing another chapter. So I saw all the game, or maybe half the game in like fragmentary form, sort of beginning to end. I don't think I ever saw the ending at his house, but I did get a sense of the game and play a lot of parts of it, I guess. Just, I didn't get that deep back to front experience of an NES game until I guess I was going to university around the time emulators were kind of taking off. You had like Nesticle and stuff like that.
Oh, we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I guess I was still in high school when I got the internet and having to like boot into DOS to run it.
Oh man, that's before my time.
Run it in Windows. Like I had Windows 95 or whatever, but you wouldn't want to run an emulator in Windows. I don't know. But when that happened, I started playing some of those games all the way through and getting to see like what does a whole NES game look like rather than just the pieces of it that I get in sessions. And I mean, there's lots of games where I feel like I got the whole, like Blades of Steel,
yeah.
That's a 30-minute game. But
the Canadian, you got the hockey game every time.
You can play it for 30 minutes, man.
Well, I think or how long is a Blades of Steel match?
Maybe I don't know, like probably close to that.
I think it's got 5 minutes.
I just prefer ice hockey.
I suck at all sports, digital or otherwise, so I can never get more than about 2 minutes in.
I liked ice hockey, but I found Blades of Steel was the one where me and my cousin both got to, I guess, a high level of skill, but an equivalent level of skill, so we could play against each other and have a lot of fun.
Gotcha.
That is the best place to be, I think.
Yeah, ice hockey never felt that way for us. We played it a bit, but
Okay.
That's not so different than most people's experiences. Like growing up, my brother was always really good at the action games, or Star Tropics was one in particular, or the Mega Man games where, I would get to the boss and then I would give him the controller and run out of the room so that way he could beat it and I couldn't watch. But somehow he would beat it and like there was magic happening. And so,
Why couldn't you watch? Because you were scared?
no, he would choke. He couldn't do it if I was watching. Yeah.
Okay.
But so like until emulation, like I really haven't seen large parts of games either. So I get that.
Or yeah, like Battletoads was one of those games where we'd always play it at my friend's house, and we'd play it 2-player, and we'd never get past the second level third level, sorry, because of like on the speed bikes, just that part at the
hard
end.
as shit.
Yeah, I'll never get
up and
past level
down.
3. Jeez.
And it's funny because we were at least at a level where one of us on our own could probably beat it like 1 in 3 times or 1 in 4 times, but both of us playing it together would never.
Yeah, that game was way harder 2 players. Not to mention you could injure each other to make it even more complicated. So let's back up and talk about the Pink Floyd again. When you put this album out, it was your first sort of foray into the NES scene, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in no way, shape, or form does it sound like anyone's first step into anything. Like, it's amazing. Like, did you have any trouble learning? I assume you used FamiTrack, right? Did you have any trouble learning the tools?
No. I mean, I'd used trackers before, so I was familiar with that. And I'd actually made like chiptune music with like, make a square wave sample and put it in a tracker. Or for people unfamiliar with trackers, like you just take recorded sounds and then you can play them at any pitch. So you play whatever note you want, and then you just arrange all the notes on a grid. And FamiTracker's like that, but there are recorded sounds, but they're very limited. It's more just the hardware's built-in sounds, the square wave, the triangle wave, the noise. So it's based on those, and those I'd been using for years before I'd seen FamiTracker. But that's sort of what goes back to just, I found trackers, I guess around the same time I found emulators. Like I had just gotten the internet and all these things were available to me that people were making and releasing for free. Things like emulators, trackers to make music with. And I learned so much from that. So, I mean, you could say I had been making tracker music for probably, I think like 2010, I started making that or something like that. So I'd been working with trackers for a decade before I got to FamiTracker.
When you did finally come to NES development and, you did the music stuff and you were kind of learning as you went and you have all these learning projects, I will call them, because
Sure.
I still look fondly upon my failed projects.
They're important. I mean, the failed projects are part of the successful project that follows.
One surely hopes. But was Lizard the game you came in wanting to make, or did that process sort of evolve over time as you learned more about the limitations of the system?
After the startup company, one of the friends I made there got me a really good contract job working on a game engine. We weren't making games directly, and that's kind of a dreary thing for me because I like the creative act of making a game, and like I said, like working with artists, that kind of. And when you're just working on middleware, there's no end to the project. You don't get to like ship it and say that's good enough to be done. I don't have to think about it anymore. Everything is an ongoing thing that has to be maintained forever.
That does not sound fun.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
That's regular software development, but that's one of the things I like about games. You're done with it and you move on to something else. Like you can just say,
for sure.
This is not ideal, but it works. Put it out. And I like that. Anyhow, so I did that. And while I was doing that, I was saving up my money and thinking about, I want to make a game. So I have all my notes and ideas about games. So that's where I kind of started with this. One of the ideas was maybe I could make a puzzle game. A friend of mine had once said to me she had a weird dream where at the end of the dream, she said, my lizard is not the lizard of knowledge, because she didn't understand something. And it was just such a weird phrase. And it was just like, it stuck in my mind. It stuck in her mind. We say my lizard is the lizard of whatever to each other now and then. Eventually I just thought, well, what if I could make a game like, I don't know, I was thinking like Lost Vikings or The Humans, where you like have different classes of human and you switch to the right one to solve the puzzle, that kind of thing. So I thought it would be a game like that. That was kind of the high level idea at first. And so when my contract gig was drying up, I had these lists of games that I thought I could make. And this one looked like something that would fit my growing interest in NES, which was also kind of happening in tandem with this. So by that time, I was really interested in the NES hardware and programming for it. I think I'd already released like a cartridge version of The Dark Side of the Moon, which was a long time coming. I mean, like I released the music version of it, which technically could have been played on an NES, but I never did for a couple of years later, till when I like bought an NES, learned to program for it, finally made the cartridge. There's a couple of years gap between that. That's first crazy. I made some music for it, and here it's actually working. But so
I really like that you visually showed like when the channels were playing, like the individual channels, like the square, and you would like, depending on the volume of the channel, like even that little visual representation was a different size. I really liked how you did that.
It's cool to be able to show people what's going on if you can manage it.
Yeah.
If you've never noticed, Kevin steals a lot of things.
Well, you should. You should steal good ideas and use them in new contexts. Like that's
my man. Oh wait, new context. Never
mind. So that was the vague idea when I started with. But then I sort of had other ideas about it when I started the initial design plan. Like I was originally thinking like, level based. Here's the new puzzle. I'll place 3 different lizards here, and you have to use each of them at a particular point in the puzzle.
So like the idea of lizards with different abilities was sort of there from the beginning?
Yeah, that was the seed of it.
If we had to assign a year to this, when would you say you were kind of hashing this part of it out?
I guess like 2012. I have like a title screen that I made back then, I think, which just, or it's not a title screen, but it has 2012 written on the screen. But I don't think I started the actual game a year later. But yeah, like when my contract ended, I started working on the game, and that's when I worked out the main kind of design goals of the game. And it was a lot different from that. Like, I don't think what it is now is, I would not call it a puzzle game. More about exploration and trying things. There, like, you still have that core idea of a lizard granting you the solution to some problems, but I tried to make problems soft, so that the lizard's just a good solution, but there's like harder solutions that you can try anyway. And this kind of leads to problems with how people play sometimes, but
my heart feels warm right now, though, because I'm just so happy inside.
Like, just in general?
No,
or
because
from
of this.
What?
Like, because I've played the game, and now hearing the person talk about it in the way that I've experienced it is just amazing.
Oh, well, I would say that's nice to hear that reflected. So it sounds like you kind of got what I was going for, I guess.
Well, I got the coffee lizard, and I stood in front of the fire, and I drank my coffee, and I slayed the rabbit, and I explained to my wife why it had to be the coffee lizard that I sat there and I drank the coffee, and she was like, well, that's the dumbest thing ever. And I'm like, no, you must... Like, the rabbit doesn't know what's going on. I'm drinking the coffee. It distracts it, so it attacks, and I run under it and all that good stuff. And then I did it yesterday when she wasn't at home with the fire lizard, and of course, it did the same exact thing. And I was like, well, never mind that theory. But
she doesn't have to know, though.
She doesn't, unless she's in the other room listening right now. But yeah, that soft and hard problems. I like that.
Well, like a lot of... people call it a Metroidvania sometimes, and it's funny because like I was consciously trying to be anti-Metroid in various ways, but not in every way, because I would say it is a lot like Metroid in some ways too.
Suits.
Yeah. Or like Mega Man, I guess, in that respect too. But yeah, like there's hard things where it's like a key that fits a lock and there's no other way to get through that. And then there's soft things where, like I was saying, it makes it a lot easier to do something, but it's not impossible to do it the other way. And that's one of the things that I think rubs a lot of people the wrong way, because they find a solution that seems like, I can do it this way. I'm going to keep trying, and they try the hard thing over and over again, and they get worn down by it. And I don't regret that. I mean, that's part of making that choice, but it does make a bad experience, at least temporarily, for some people.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you and just tell you right now. One of the two people you're talking to is kind of ambivalent about many of the things you're currently describing. The other person loves them beyond anything else. I think you can kind of guess which is which.
Well, yeah, like it's a game I was making that I knew I would enjoy if I got to play it as a human that didn't make this game. Yeah, like I made this game because I thought there were some things I could do in it that I wasn't seeing in many games that I wished they would do, and I would enjoy if they did. So that's kind of my motivation for making the game from the baseline. So
love intrinsic motivation.
Getting back to what I was saying before, the kind of game that it is. So I had intended it to be a game you can play in basically maybe 30 minute or 1 hour, maybe 2 hour sessions where, and this is kind of spoilers about the game, depending on whether you care about knowing this or not. For some people, discovering everything is very interesting.
It is.
And for some people, it is not. For
not.
them, it's not a spoiler. But so there are like 6 bosses in the game and 6 lizards that basically there's a 1-to-1. This is the best lizard for this boss.
I counted 7.
Idea. There's more lizards and there's more bosses maybe.
Okay, all right. Just making sure that I wasn't like completely spacing that, because I had it written out and was like, I know there's more than 6 here.
Yeah. That's another thing about like with modern games, you have achievements.
Kevin,
if you want to make something that's really a secret, it has to not be an achievement.
Exactly.
So there's 6 lizard achievements in my game. That does not mean that's all the lizards, but
yes.
So that's a bit of a spoiler too. But well, I don't know. You've already mentioned one of them, one of the secret lizards. So I tried to make some that were extra hidden.
I thought he was essential too.
And then I put an ending at the end of each boss,
yes,
which was sort of a soft ending you can continue with. And this confuses a lot of people too.
It took
because this is also very so the idea, the original, or I should say, like the intended plan is you'd play it, you'd beat a boss, and then the next time you'd try and play it and find another boss until you've done all of them. And then maybe you realize, what if I continue and do all of them in one session? And then that's the long game.
I can't believe I figured that out for myself. I'm just going to say that now.
I'm impressed, Beau.
Good night. So am I, because I suck at games.
That's almost verbatim what you told me.
And what I would say is that's not a normal structure for a game these days.
No, it's not.
And the very critical thing is, it's almost insane to make a game that doesn't have a save that just saves everything you've done.
It's a little concerned about that, but
in this day and age, like that's basically just an expected thing. But it's also a thing that relatively few NES games had. Like only some specific genres. And I mean, like you do have NES games that have saves, but it's not, definitely not the majority, but maybe it's some of the more memorable games.
One of the major additions you made to Lizard, we were all kind of, we being the Kickstarter backers, there were 325 of us or something. One of the major additions you made from that initial demo build and the initial presentation of the project to the final game was you added horizontal scrolling, dual screens as opposed to just a single screen. Did that kind of alter your hopes? That because at one time you had sort of said that the majority of the rest of the tasks of the game were all concentrated on level design and development content, and then it became this, like, I remember several updates about scrolling and adding all this in, how that kind of changed everything. Is that what kind of kept the project from coming out for so long?
That was a bigger impact than I thought it would be. So I don't know. I would say what kept it coming out for so long is a more vague answer that I'm not an efficient person. I'm not great at managing my time. And
What could that even
sounds
mean?
funny. I know it's hard to say what that means, but it doesn't mean anything specific. It means just I'm very good at wasting time. Especially when it's my own time on my own dime. But and I'm actively trying to find ways to make myself better at that, but mixed success with it.
I know that feeling.
Time management is difficult. So a lot of the delay is just you should just blame me for being a stupid person. But
It's not that easy.
I don't think you're that.
I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy.
But getting back on to the topic where I can say more useful things, the increasing the size of the world. So I increased the data size by 2, and like I doubled it.
So it wasn't just screen size; it was actual data size. Like the world grew double the size.
I made the ROM twice as big, and basically,
oh shoot, okay, that explains a ton.
I doubled how much space I doubled how much space I'd allowed for code. I did not double the music space. The music stayed where it was
because it's awesome.
I had made 32 kilobytes for music, and that's already a lot for an NES game. I think there's only like 10 NES games that had 32 kilobytes of music.
Good.
So thank you.
I'll say that
I'm pretty
many
happy
times in this episode, but your music is amazing. Continue.
So it already had a lot of music, and it had music for every area of the game that was going to exist. So I did not double that. Part of the reason I didn't double it is because like half the areas didn't exist in the demo, and I'd already made music for them, so I didn't need.
So they actually like weren't like planned out. They weren't programmed in some fashion or another. They were just kind of filler material when you got to that screen.
Yeah, so in the demo you get to the edge of an area and it'll say like root zone not in
yes,
demo,
that's so tantalizing.
Like that. So I had made the tiles for that section. So the graphics were kind of set, the palettes were set. The enemies weren't fully fleshed out for any of the demo areas that were not in it, and the boss wasn't ready yet for any of those. So but the music was already there. So when you get there, you hear the music in just this one screen.
Oh, yes.
And that's all you get. You got to stay there to hear it, I guess.
Oh, I do.
You don't experience it as part of the area because the area doesn't exist. So in that respect, I didn't feel I needed to double the music. It already had quite a lot, and it was already kind of designed for the end game. But I more than doubled the space of the levels. I doubled the space of the code, and I think eventually I more than doubled it because I stuck it into other places as well. And then I doubled the space for graphics, which made a lot of room for more subtle things and also for the bosses.
Yeah, those bosses have to eat up a ton of graphics. I can't imagine. Well,
the bosses I made,
imagine looking at them, I can.
The bosses I made for the demo were the octopus and the cat.
Yeah,
and they both fit on one kilobyte of graphic space.
Oh wow.
All the bosses I made subsequent to that took like 4 kilobytes each or something like that. Like I gave myself a lot more room to do stuff with them after I doubled the space kind of thing.
I got to the castle area boss, and my wife was she was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I was like, but it's so hard. I can't beat this. This is not cool right now.
Yeah, the frog's got several kilobytes just to itself.
I can imagine.
Because it takes up so much space on the screen.
Yeah.
It's one of the largest NES bosses probably ever.
It's big. I wouldn't say the largest, but...
I know you're going to pull out some obscure examples, some Famicom game somewhere, but it's pretty darn big.
So what was it like, the Kickstarter's going along, you double the scope of everything. Like, what was it like being behind schedule? How were you feeling? Like, what kind of feedback were you getting from the community? Like, was it disheartening? Was it irritating? Like, how are you feeling in general?
Well, I mean, so for me, it's just the daily feeling that, oh no, I've wasted another day of basically my own money. Like, I'm not getting any new money from backers by taking longer, so they're not helping me anymore. They're only helping me to the point that I thought the budget was reasonable in the first place.
Oh yeah.
Which it was not,
Oh.
apparently. Or maybe it was if I was more efficient. Like, that's what I say. I'm angry at myself for not being able to do what I thought I could do.
Kind of,
You know what I
but
mean?
that's only in terms of productivity. In terms of the finished result, that's a separate question we'll ask you in a minute.
Well, okay. The finished result I'm very happy with, but in terms of productivity, I am not happy with myself, and I feel like the only consequences the backers have to deal with is having to wait for it. And I feel that. I know what it's like waiting for something, but basically anyone who came after me about it, I would say, if you want a refund, you can have it. And I gave a few refunds, but most people didn't want a refund. Most people wanted to see
I would
the game.
literally wait another 10 years if it meant what you had envisioned. So after 4, I was okay with
Well,
that.
thank you. But no, I would say it was like, for me, somebody saying you've been taking too long or what's going on. Well, someone saying you've been taking too long is easy to deal with because I already agree with that. And I'm already hard on myself for that being like, anything they say does not affect me in that, you know, I'm already worse on myself for that.
It does
But
disarm
someone
them right away. It's
asking-
like, oh, you already feel bad? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Take it all
them
back.
asking the question is harder because I feel like I should answer every question that's asked of me, and I try to. Like, I really make an effort to respond to any question that people do ask me. And sometimes there's just not a good answer. Like, if you want to ask why the game is taking an extra year or an extra 2 years, that's a complicated question because that's a day-to-day thing. It's like, this thing took 4 times as long as I thought it would, and here's why. I could explain that, but
That'll delay.
That's not the answer they want, though.
yeah, like, that's an answer that explains 4 days, and I would have to repeat that answer, 100 times, and it doesn't, you can't do that. You can't give someone the day-to-day rundown of like every expectation that wasn't what you thought it would be. So all I can say is, it's not, it took me longer than I thought, and I'm not as fast as I thought I would be.
So it's out. You're done. Lizard is now in the hands of people. It can be bought. It is in many ways kind of a chapter that's been closed. What do you kind of think of the whole experience now? Do you feel good about it? Were you able to accomplish what you wanted to? Do you feel like you made the game you set out to? Did you have to kind of curtail anything that you would have wanted to do better? I know a lot of people save things for that sequel folder. Just sort of, what are your final thoughts?
I would say that the only disappointment I have with Lizard is that it took me so long to make. The finished game I'm very happy with. It is very much, it is very close to the high level idea I had, 4 years earlier when I started it. But I would say part of taking so long to do it, I feel like it's not as notable a game now as it would have been, say if I'd finished it 2 years earlier or 3 years earlier when I thought I could finish it, but failed
that's
to.
every game that, when it's announced, it's much bigger than when it actually comes out because the community has actually been getting much, better over the years.
Yeah, I'm super optimistic about how the NES community has grown, and I'm glad about that part of it. Even though I feel like I missed my optimal timing window for release, but I'm very excited about all the NES games that are coming out. A lot of neat stuff is happening now.
Have you had a lot of feedback from people that have played it? Like, have they primarily liked it? Like, what's the consensus been?
It's hard to say what the consensus is. Like, my grand hope is that Lizard gets accurately described and characterized, and the people who would like it can find it. It gets to those people, and the people who wouldn't like it are informed and know to avoid it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
we'll do our best to spread the word.
I know people have bought it and have been disappointed by it, and I know some people have bought it. Well, I don't feel bad. I don't feel any scorn towards them. Like,
I do.
I know like I was saying about game design decisions, like any decision I make, I know it's going to hurt some people and excite other people. So I made this game for a person who is like me in some respects, or enough respects that they will enjoy this. So That's what I try to do, and I hope it finds its way to other people like that. That's all I can say. Like I've had a lot of negative feedback, and I've had a lot of positive feedback, and I can't say.
The fact that you're getting feedback at all is like
Well,
huge.
okay, yeah.
Like,
opinion. Mission
yeah,
accomplished.
that's
true.
awesome.
Well, that's one thing I should say about beta testing. Like, so I did a beta testing period for this, but most of the people who beta test are probably also the kind of people who will like it. Like, there's a huge bias there because, like, beta test in the professional world, you would QA, and those people are paid to play your game. Beta test, you can't pay someone, so you give them the game. And you hope that the value of playing a new game that nobody's played before is worth something to them. And it is worth something. Like, I'm not going to say that's worth nothing. That is definitely worth something. But it also means that they only play it in as much as they are still having fun with it. And they will either, like, a lot of people just won't play it because they're like, oh, this is unfinished. I'm not going to play it yet.
You got to find the right testers, man.
Yeah. And a lot of people will play it to the extent where I'll only play it as far as I'm having fun with it, and then they'll stop. And then a lot of people will play it to the extent where they'll play it, but they won't give you any feedback. That happens a lot too. But that's sort of the nature of beta testing. This is unpaid labor, and anything that comes back is gold for me. Like, I'm super happy to accept every feedback, especially negative feedback. I want to know all the places people were having the most trouble with, and it's hard to get that back from people because basically the people who don't like it, stop playing it, won't talk to you.
All right, so you finished Lizard. Obviously, that took quite some time to complete. Is there any desire to sort of jump back into development and make something new now? Or, like, if you do, is it going to be quite as ambitious? Like, what are your plans now?
I've already started. I would say I have 3 other really compelling ideas for NES games that I want to do. And I would say that there is little to prevent them all from happening except,
time and money.
Time. Well,
we were all thinking it.
Not even money, just me dying or something.
Well,
something bad happening to me.
Don't do that.
Your lizard is not the lizard of death.
I've got
Mine
3
is.
other NES games that I definitely want to make, and I will try as hard as I can to make them happen within the next decade.
That's good news for all of us.
It's actually a fairly constrained time goal, considering.
Yes, actually it is. That only gives me, I guess, 3 and a third years for each of them, but I think that should be enough. But I mean, in the meantime, I don't know. I might end up finding a regular job and working for someone else in the near future.
Boo.
It depends what happens in the next few months before
Kevin,
I run
that's
out of
what
money.
you do.
Yeah, I know. But I work on my games at my work.
True.
Like, when last job I had, I saved up a lot of money, and I've been able to coast on it until now, and it's kind of running out. So basically, I'm gonna press as hard as I can on my current project until I run out of money, and then I'll see where I'm at, and then I'll either work for someone else, or I'll continue doing what I'm doing, or I'll run a Kickstarter, see what happens.
All right, so we've asked the hard questions. We're gonna get to the fun questions now.
Okay.
You can answer these however you want. First question is, what is your favorite NES homebrew of all time?
I usually say Super Bat Puncher.
Ah, yes.
That has a lot of
Solid
polish.
choice.
It has a lot of polish. It has a great soundtrack. The only downside is it's not a long-term game. Like, it's a game you can play through in half an hour, but it's very good half hour.
Well, it was a demo, yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I don't know. I talked to Meow. I don't know. They talked to me after I did my Kickstarter and about all the things. Like, they know how much time it would take to make a, Super Mario 3 length game out of it or whatever.
Oh yeah.
The thing that makes good on what it's promising in that half an hour. And I think they decided just to leave it where it is because it's wonderful where it is. But I'm trying to think, like, other than that, the games of like longer scale, Legends of Aulia was very good,
Mm-hmm.
and the Mad Wizard, Candelabra Chronicles Part 1, I think it was called, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those two both made a pretty lengthy game that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah, that game's awesome.
The Mad Wizard is a kind of a good puzzle sort of game, puzzle exploration. I guess it's similar to Lizard, but it is much more slowly paced.
Yeah.
And
There are a lot of similarities there, yeah. Even though Kevin loves one and maybe ambivalent on the other.
You don't get quite as lost in that game. There's only a few ways to go.
You don't get lost if you know where you're going.
Well, alas.
Mm.
All right, we'll move on to question number 2. I mean, that's a pretty good answer, unless you want to elaborate more.
I don't know. Those are sort of my top 3, I'd say.
So, do you have, out of everyone that's sort of doing things in the community, do you have a favorite home brewer of all time?
I don't think so. Like, I
Okay.
like what Meow's done. I like a lot of stuff that Kevin's done. I like actually
This Kevin?
No, not me.
No.
the incident was surprisingly good. I'm actually a big fan of Sokoban transport type games.
He's never heard of that term.
Like
I have now.
I have some favorites in that genre. Like A Good Snowman is hard to build. I don't know if you played that one.
No,
But
I'll look it up though.
that
I
one's
need
my
lengthy titles like that.
Is that a PC game?
yeah. It's PC, Android, probably some other platforms, but
Okay.
it's wonderful. Alan Hesdelin, I think is the name of the designer for that. He's done a bunch of kind of Sokoban type games.
Ooh.
But that one
Kevin's
is
going to steal his levels.
Merry Christmas. You're
that one
damn
is the
right.
cream of the crop. And actually that one you could re-implement on NES if you really want.
All right, looking it up now.
But it's sort of Sokoban with the twist of you can roll snow and make a large ball, a medium ball, and a small ball to make a snowman. And then there's like a nega world where you have to solve the snowman in a particular location to solve like a meta puzzle. It's amazing. I don't know how to describe it, but
Did you say a naked world?
nega or like
Oh, okay. That's less exciting.
Oh, void type stuff. Okay. Yeah.
negative universe.
I thought you said naked too, and I was like, there's
Is that
snow.
a
They don't have clothes, man.
sorry? Negaverse
Scarves?
is probably a Sailor Moon term. I think
Oh, I'm
it was
with
in.
you.
Kevin thinks he's with you, but he's not that hip.
Hey,
I used to
love
watch
Sailor
any
Moon.
anime I could when I was like in high school, and Sailor Moon was one of the available things that was had made it to Canada.
One last question. It's by far the most important question, and honestly, if I could only ask one question, this would have been the one that I would have asked.
Okay.
People that follow you on Twitter, maybe early on, would have noticed that you are quite the soup connoisseur.
I'd say
Um,
aficionado.
What is your favorite soup?
Soup connoisseur. Oh man. Tomato soup for sure.
Oh, are you serious?
There is no wrong answer, Beau.
I love tomato.
Tomato is always the wrong answer.
But there is a YouTube channel called Super Tasters run by Ben McGraw and Jim Crawford. I don't know if you know Ben McGraw from. I don't know if he's any released notable games, and I feel terrible saying that. But Jim Crawford
I don't know if he's
released.
done anything good, but he has made some games, yes.
Well, maybe I could talk about. There's an RPG engine called Verge, which kind of manifested around like 1997, around the time when I got the internet originally. Like I was dial-up internet at home.
The good days.
PBS?
This
Oh,
and this-
that was earlier than that.
RPG engine, like think of it as like RPG Maker, but free and not open source at that point. I think it might be open source now, but that's what we had. I was making my own RPG with my own engine, and that was how I was like learning how to make games myself. But
Oh, I've seen those pictures on Twitter.
Verge was an RPG engine where they were doing something similar to me, and I like fell into the IRC community, and Ben McGraw was a big member of it. But there's this one called Sully, which was like the demonstration RPG that came with it, which is amazing. It's maybe not amazing to look at now, but like for the community, it was just like the game all of us played in like several different versions of it. Whenever they added a new feature to the engine, we would play this game again with the new features in it and find out what was new about the engine. And so Ben McGraw is still making Sully. It is not out yet, but he's been working on it for several years. And there's going to be like I think he's making it with Game Maker or whatever, or maybe with RPG Maker or something like that. And there will be a Sully Chronicles RPG that comes out. And every Verge member will probably be an instant buy-in, but I'm not, maybe it'll just like seem like yet another RPG Maker game to everyone else, but I will love it. It's got a lot of good humor in it. And Jim Crawford, the other member of Super Tasters, made Frog Fractions, whom I think people know about Frog Fractions, but if you don't know about it, that's wonderful, and I recommend just look it up and play it. It's a Flash game, just play it. That's all I can say about Frog Fractions.
But soup, man, soup.
Yeah, and they taste soup every week. So yeah,
okay, that was okay. Got it.
I had a soup bowl that I really liked that was melon.
That's what prompted this whole thing, I think.
I almost sent you a new soup bowl. It was a Kirby one. It was. I thought it'd be perfect for you.
I still haven't found a replacement soup bowl, I would say. It was a melamine soup bowl I got for $3 at like a Korean bootleg shop.
The best
in Toronto. They just had all these like, stuff for $1 or $2 or $3, and they just had this soup bowl with a radish on it. And I was like, this is the right shape. I like this shape of bowl, and I just had soup in it many times, and it was very good. But then one time I put it in the fridge, and then I was rinsing it in hot water, and it cracked. Melamine does not... You don't put melamine in the microwave, and you don't want to put it in the dishwasher, really. You want to hand wash it. But it was just going from cold to hot. It cracked, and then I had this cracked bowl, and my favorite soup bowl was gone.
Man, that was sad. I remember seeing the tweet and just being like, this dude has lost something very important to him.
It was a dark day.
I used it a lot. And I still haven't found a bowl that I like as much as it. I have a big bowl, but it's not the same shape or size or fun as that radish bowl.
Well, shoot. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's been like 3 hours, eh?
Yeah.
Good luck editing it down, or...
And we are going to listen to... I'm sorry, it's my favorite. We have to listen to it. It's the Root Zone theme. It's too good, Kevin. Is that okay?
Of course it is, Beau. Anything for you.
All right, so here's the Root Zone theme from Lizard.
All right, Beau. So we've had a couple episodes now where we've talked to lots of other people about other games, other projects, other happenings. We haven't really talked about us lately. What are you doing these days?
Me, we all know what I'm doing. What I'm
Do
perpetually
we?
doing. I'm trying to build boxes and failing miserably.
Fighting the electronic boss.
You know, why bother to make games when you could spend all your time making boxes?
You know, it sounds like a lot of fun when you're just sending me curse words throughout the day. Like, no context, just fuck.
You know I don't curse.
Yes, never.
Often. No, too often. Anyways, the good news is that it looks like that has finally been kind of figured out, and that means that I will finally be able to move on in life, and I could not be more excited.
I'm sure your wife can't be more excited either.
She actually thinks this podcast is kind of the biggest waste of time, but
Oh, okay. Well, who asked her anyway?
not you anymore.
Nope.
But
you've been making some pretty good progress on some of your programming too. You've sent me some animated GIFs.
I'm not familiar with that term.
You know, animated GIFs.
GIFs?
GIFs?
Yeah, I actually, MGC, the Midwest Gaming Classic, was a couple months ago, and it kind of fell in the midst of some life things and these other episodes that seem to never end. And MGC went really well, and I was able to sort of show off some of what I've been working on kind of behind the scenes. I don't normally like to post a lot online, partially because, I did this Kickstarter thing, and I feel bound by that to only deliver that and nothing more, and that 100% of my time should be spent working on that and nothing else. And so I tend to just sort of show these things in person. And another part of me just doesn't really like to show things online because I don't know. I don't really know why. But I got some good feedback at MGC. I showed parts of Family Vacation. I showed parts of the RPG I've been working on, sort of the stuff that's been brewing over the last year. And I'm not quite sure kind of how it's all going to go together yet. But progress is being made. I worked on some things like scrolling. I finally tackled that monster, and it wasn't so bad. I was sort of kind of shocked.
You did some really impressive stuff with text boxes and stuff too.
Oh, I can make text boxes all day. If somebody would just pay me money to make text boxes, I would do that.
Boxes on boxes on boxes.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm excited, man.
I think I have to cut all those fancy text boxes that I did too. They don't actually fit into the game, but that was only like 3 weeks worth of work.
Yeah, but you can rip that out of that game and throw it into another game now.
It fits in nothing. Anyways, what have you been doing, Kevin?
Oh man, I've been doing so much.
Talk to me.
So, I've been working on my Risk clone for a while. I've spent months and months. Felt like a data entry person. I was just coding color data, like, the addresses of how to change pixel by pixel, line by line, the colors for each tile depending on who owns that territory.
If this was the licensed era, you just would have shotgunned it and, I don't know, just done big maps or something that don't change color.
I think if this was the licensed era, I wouldn't have done Risk because that's what they decided not to do. Like, it came out for every system, but not Nintendo. Well, and I'm about to change that if I can pull this off. But yeah, I've been doing some really cool stuff with Risk. Because there are so many unique tiles on the world map, I'm having to do a lot of tricks with that. And I'm trying to do some tricks with, overlaying sort of sprites on top of the map. Just there's a lot of things that are unique to this game that I haven't had to tackle yet in the various projects I've done, that I'm sort of having to figure out along the way. And I've had the help of you, I've had the help of Rob from Sly Dog, I've had the help of Tim, Memblers has piped in now and then. Like, it's really nice having the support system of this community and you guys sort of pushing me to achieve things that I probably wouldn't have tackled on my own. I think I have the reputation of maybe taking the easy way out now and again. So doing some things that are taking taking time is not the norm, but I think it's going to pay off. The project's going to be really, really good when it winds up being finished.
And that's the best part of a project, though, is learning some new stuff.
It is. And honestly, before this game, I never knew how to manipulate actual pixel level data, on the fly on Nintendo. So it's cool to learn that. Every time you unlock a new secret, it's like an achievement that you've conquered. You can add another thing to your repertoire. But yeah, I've been working on that. And also, I think I've mentioned that I'm working on an original Larry sequel to my Larry game. Yeah, who knows what I'll call it. I could just call it Larry. I could call it Larry. I'm not using Leisure Suit, right? I don't know. I'll get some lawyers on that.
Sierra. Yeah. Good luck with that.
But Zach from Retrotainment, who did the graphics for the Haunted Halloween series, he's been working on the graphics for that game. So every month he sends me more, and every month I am inspired more and more. This month he sent me some of the final graphics for Chapter 1. And, every month I look at them and every month I love them. But this is the first month that I've really taken the time to sort of download them all and look at them all sort of as a compilation of one world. And I'm more excited than ever. It's been great sort of seeing that. But in addition to all that, I've been sort of getting back into programming.
More?
Yeah, I'm really inspired lately, man. Like, I've been taking the time to stream on Twitch. Which I've never done before, but I really wanted to sort of play through some of these homebrews. So I've been playing Black Box Challenge. I had the opportunity to beta test Candelabra Estacero from Slydog, which is like a 3D dungeon crawler. And I didn't even know that I was into these types of games until I was just browsing Twitch one night, and I came across this guy that was streaming Swords and Serpents. I had never seen this game before, but he was playing it with such enthusiasm, and it just really intrigued me. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go home and I'm going to play this. So I, fired it up on my power pack, decided to play through it. And in playing this game, I sort of developed this love for dungeon crawlers, and I remembered that Rob had worked on one, and it's I remember it being close to being finished, so I asked him how close it was and if I could sort of check it out, and that inspired him to sort of polish it up a little bit and finish it. So he sent me sort of a finalized, I don't know how finalized, but a pretty dang finalized ROM, and I played through the game in a series of sittings, and I streamed a lot of it on Twitch. But man, like, that game is awesome. So I can't wait for the rest of you to play that. What sucks is I think he's not releasing it for a while. Like, he wants to get some other games in the Candelabra series out first. But man, whenever you finally get the chance to play through this game, I think he did a heck of a job.
Yeah, and Rob's masterful vision, you have the Rise of Amandus, you have the Mad Wizard, you have Estacero, Candelabra, and then there's like, I don't know,
Scarlet
50 other
Matron.
games.
Yeah, he's working on a game for every character in the series, and then like a game for every boss, like every bad guy. Like, it's really unique the way he's sort of creating this epic world, and you actually learn so much about each individual character. It's going to be fun to follow along as he gets further along in that series.
Raise your hand if you played D&D growing up. I think Rob can do that.
Yeah, but yeah, man, it's a great game. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, programming a lot more and actually gaming a lot more. It's been fun.
It's weird, it's summer, you're supposed to be outside, right? And then we're
Oh
inside.
my god, it's so hot out there. You don't want to go out there.
Oh, that's because you're in the hell that is Florida.
Yeah, there are panthers out there, I hear.
Oh man, panthers, sinkholes, guns everywhere. It's Florida. It's like the Wild West with panthers and sinkholes. It's the best I got.
Yeah, well, it's where I am. It's where I chose to be, so I guess I can't complain.
Anyways, what's been going on in the community these days?
I mean, so much. I mean, we've been covering the Nestev competition episodes for so long that, like, we got some catching up to do here, man. So yeah, you mentioned you went to MGC. That was a good time? Was it a good turnout there?
MGC was awesome. Normally Portland has sort of the reputation for having kind of the most brewers at it, or Magfest has a number. But MGC is starting to get, there's a good number of us there in the Midwest. Frank was there. He did Arm for Battle. Nathan Talbert was there. He had sort of, he was selling copies of kind of a sampler cart that he's done. It's got a couple of his compo entries, the Robo Ninja Climb and Spacey McRacy, but it also had sort of a teaser loaded onto it of his Blaster Master Metroidvania, which was sort of cool. It was like, man, like you threw a demo onto a cartridge, you're selling it, people can buy it. That's cool. I want this. I wasn't expecting it, so that sort of was neat. Plus, he helped me carry some heavy things that I couldn't lift, which is always nice.
Yep, you and I both need that help these days.
Yeah, getting old. Ferris, he was there, which I was sort of surprised to see him because he's coming all the way from Texas. He was part of our Christmas episode, one of the big homebrew collectors, but always fun to talk to. Kevbot was there with his sort of little arcade cabs. I say little, but they are physically little, like they're tiny little things.
Did Memblers make it up?
Yeah, Joe made it up. He brought the whole family, everything, and always a blast to see him. He had some stuff on display. He actually brought his whole homebrew collection. You could play anything from the Super Bat Puncher demo to, Haunted Halloween 86. He had just kind of everything there. You just pop it in and check it out. Speaking of which, the Haunted Halloween guys were there. Tim, who did Tailgate Party, he was there showing off. I mean, when he has the space, he can do quite the spread. He's got, 2 TVs, 2 power pads. You're chucking beanbags from like 15 feet away. Like, it's a scene, man.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what makes it special. Like, I feel bad when I think he was, when he went to Portland, it didn't seem like he had quite enough space to like fully get the full effect to like show off his game, but it seemed like up at MGC he had the space, and it had a good turnout.
This year, 2 years ago, he was in like we put him widthwise in a hotel room which was like 10 feet wide, so you're like your hands like hitting the back wall as you're trying to throw over. It wasn't pretty, but he still won the award for like most creative project from the actual like show people, but it was in a new
that's awesome.
It was in a new venue this year, and we had like a giant room. I'm gonna forget somebody, I always do, but I didn't forget Frank this time, which is great because usually it's him and I just feel bad every time.
Wrecked came out, right? That game that Vectrex was working on that was inspired by a Nintendo Age thread about some Walmart fiasco. It turned into a joke that turned into a game that turned into a
movie
game about a joke.
Oh, it turned into
a movie.
Yeah, movie. It's got Bob Hoskins in it. No, this is the second game. Sorry, I'm still trying to dwell on who I forgot at MGC, but your
jokes are so good though.
I know,
I don't know how you're multitasking at this level.
Solid notes, sir. Notes. Yeah, Wrecked came out. It's the second game that Vectrex has done based on kind of, I don't want to say inflammatory. The first one was inflammatory. I don't know if this is inflammatory, but like
so inflammatory that it was banned from Magfest.
Oh yeah, that was the cornball thread.
Yeah, the other one.
Yeah, that was inflammatory in multiple ways. Anyways, Wrecked was just kind of dumb. Some dude just kind of like went off the handle about a stupid situation that really was like, well, duh. But Vec with his creative young man's mind, and he's Swiss. Kind of made up this whole game, and he doesn't he's made some simple games in the past. He did Kami Killer, I guess, was another one. That wasn't a forum thread. That was like some weird guy he saw give a presentation, so he puts a giant version of his head into a game and you shoot it, and he shoots
nice
communist symbols at you. I don't know. It was weird. And then, Cornball got a little more complicated, kind of like a sliding shooter, but Wrecked has 4 different game states. It's got almost dual controller action. He should have put that in, but he didn't. And, it's got platforming. It's just got a lot. It's sort of surprising. He kind of, really, for it being kind of a dumb joke thread, really put a lot of work into it, and kind of, he just keeps making better and better games each time.
Yeah, and it's interesting almost as a sociological experiment to watch, because it seems like the games that he's making about the community sell really well.
They do.
People get very, very excited about them, So it's interesting to watch, and it's a little, I don't know, it's I have complicated emotions about it because,
It's
those of
called
us
jealousy,
that are
Kevin.
making these, and you're very right. I mean, when you boil down to it, that's exactly what it is. You and I, we put our heart and soul into these like passion projects, and then this joke comes up on Nintendo Age, and Vec's like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a game about that," and like he's posting updates, and people are getting excited, and we're like, "Hey, like, what about us?" But it's great. Like, hats off to him. Like, he has the capability of making something out of that turns into like an actual good game. Like, good for him. I'd do it too if I could.
Another game that's recently come out was Lucky Penguin. That's finally made it out. I know that was sort of one that I was kind of supposed to help with, but that kind of fell through. But the game has still seen the light of day, and it has now been released. I think copies are being shipped to not backers, because it wasn't a Kickstarter, it was an auction deal online. Copies are being shipped to bidders. And yeah, I think it turned out pretty well. Where that was Marcelo and Lucas. They sort of tag team that, and yeah, came up with a pretty good game.
Yeah, I've talked about it before, and I'm glad that people are finally getting a chance to play it because it is a cute little puzzle game.
Yeah, cute is definitely a word for it.
So this gentleman named Chris, who goes by CPP Chris, CPP online, he's released this really cool tool called NES Starter Kit, and it's sort of like a quick start guide to make like a little Zelda type adventure game if you can program in C. It's sort of like an alternative to I know NES Maker, it had the big Kickstarter and people have been talking about it. NES Starter Kit is out, so you can actually download it for free, play around with it, and actually release some cool little games. So if you want to check that out, you can find that on Nintendo Age, probably on NestDev too, but yeah, just search for NES Starter Kit.
Some other big news in the community has been the fact that I think it was back in episode 2 or 3, we played some music that Derek from Gradual Games had been doing for an unnamed project.
It is named.
He has named it,
Dun,
but
dun,
he has,
dun.
he has also revealed footage of it in action. So
Yeah.
be sure to find his Twitter Who's It page or whatever and look for the game called Trophy. It is kind of a Mega Man-esque game, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, he's been working on that for a long time.
Yes, with him, yes, he has.
I mean, but he knows it, and that's why it's literally the name of his company, Gradual Games. He'll gradually get it out, but yeah, you can really tell that he's put some time into this game. It looks very solid from the gameplay video, so I'm excited to finally check that out. I think he said it's getting decently close to being, I don't know if it's released or in beta, like some sort of playable version is supposed to be, I think he said this year sometime.
I've learned with Derek that when Derek starts to actually publicly talk about a game, it's pretty much done. Or very close. Like within a year and a half of being out the door completely. He did that with Alia, and it was just like, oh man, when is this going to be over? And it was like, oh, it's here already. Wow, that was cool.
And last but not least, a lot of donations have been rolling in from sponsors for the NES Spectrum Marathon that I'm going to be putting on in September. I really want to take the time to thank all of you for doing that. I can't tell you how much it means to have the support of the community behind me. I really want to do your games justice and kind of show them off to the world. Doing it from someone who makes them, I think, is going to be sort of special, and giving them away, to put them in people's houses that maybe aren't as exposed to these as the rest of us. It's going to be nice. So we're going to do that in September. I want to say it's September 7th through 9th. So yeah, if you guys want to check that out, I'll be streaming it on Twitch. We're going to be playing games for 50 plus hours to raise money for autism research.
That is a lot of hours.
It is, man, but it's going to be great.
I guess I'm not hip to these new things that you kids do, and so I didn't realize you would be playing for that long. Wow.
Well, I mean, we're going to do it in shifts. I'm not going to be staying awake for that long. That would be ludicrous.
Huh. That's good to know.
Yeah, you will be able to turn on our Twitch channel and watch gameplay being played for 50 plus hours to raise money. So yeah, check that out. Anything else you want to touch on, Beau?
Nope, you go ahead with the regulars.
Okay. As always, we want to thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, you can email us at nesassemblyline@gmail.com. Ask us questions. We'll answer them on a future episode. If you want to learn more about Beau or I, or send us any questions or feedback directly, I can be found on Twitter at A Ton of Glaciers. Beau, of course, can be found at Soul Goose. We're on there pretty regularly, and the community is growing every day. It's a very special time to be involved in this stuff, and you can always join Nintendo Age. If you want to get interested, if you want to learn more about homebrew, get involved, learn to program yourself. There are tutorials. You can do graphics. You can do music. There's room for you in this community if you have the least amount of interest. So come on in. The water's fine. But as always, we appreciate you. Did I miss anything?
Can I just say it's weird to not do a 3-hour episode? Can I say that?
You can, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's nice to get in and out. That's what she said.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to kind of close this episode with some music from Frankengraphics. You might know her as the artist extraordinaire from Project Blue, Inherent Smile, Gift of Discernment, a few others that are kind of in the works and around the community, not to mention the fact that she does amazing level design like in Project Blue. And yeah, she also does music. What doesn't she do?
Yeah, it's not fair, man. These people are too dang talented.
This track is from her. It can be found on her blog, where she kind of details her experiences of learning to do art, music, programming, you name it, for the NES. Which, you know, seeing as how she started just a year or two ago is kind of inspiring. It's like, wow, I should have used my time better. But this is kind of a gothic themed track, so here it is, untitled track number 3.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.